All right, it's the Security Weekly News Wrap-Up Show, and it's the last show of January. Can you believe that already? It's the week of the 24th of January. The Walking Dead, Sudo, Slipstreaming, Office 365, Gamestop, and all the show wrap-ups on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the attackers that put our critical systems in jeopardy. Core Impact from Core Security is a penetration testing tool that safely finds vulnerabilities using the same techniques of adversaries, with certified exploits and wizards that guide you through critical pen tests while maximizing the time of advanced testers by automating their routines. With Core Security, you can safeguard your infrastructure by limiting access, detecting threats, testing for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitoring data. Visit securityweekly.com/core security. Do you know where your organization's crown jewel data is, whose data it is, what it contains, and if it's flagged, tagged, and classified accurately? Defense in Depth requires discovery in depth. At Big ID, they help organizations uncover dark data, classify sensitive and regulated data, meet compliance requirements, and take action for data on-prem, in the cloud, and everywhere in between. Learn more about how Discovery in-depth can change the way enterprise organizations find, classify, and protect sensitive data at securityweekly.com/Big ID.
Hello, I'm Doug White from Roger Williams University. I'll be your host on Security Weekly News Wrap-Up Show this week. Let's wrap up all the show topics. On Application Security Weekly number 137, John and Mike had Taylor McCaslin. He's the Senior Product Manager at GitLab. And the segment was to talk about a bunch of reports that are going to come out very soon, like Gartner. One of the ones they were talking about was Gartner AppSec Testing Magic Quadrant. And there's tons of these reports around. And so the focus of this segment was about how to use this stuff. You know, what does it mean? And what's your placement on it if you're lucky enough to be on the Gartner Magic Quadrant? What's your placement on them mean? So they had a whole list of GitLab security analyst reports and things like that they were talking about. So quite an interesting segment about all these security reports that come out every year. On Enterprise Security Weekly 214, Adrian, Paul, and Tyler Shields covered the news in the first segment. And then in the second segment, Frederick Nordberg Almroth, who's the co-founder and head of engineering at Detectify, talked about DNS hijacking. And Frederick was talking about how he claimed the .cd, which is the Congo top-level domain, and he was talking about how these domain takeovers work and how you might prevent them. Really good segment. I think DNS hijacking stuff is quite interesting, and this was a cool one with somebody that actually had hijacked essentially a top-level domain. On their third segment, Alan Alford, the CISO of the Cyber Ranch podcast, joined the gang to talk about supply chain security now after the SolarWinds mess. So what is supply chain security doing now? Where's it going? And what was the impact of SolarWinds? On Business Security Weekly number 203, Paul, Jason, and Matt had on Matt Cawthorn, the VP of Sales and Engineering at ExtraHop. They were talking about the Sunburst attack, so more about this same SolarWinds business, and they were talking about why no one detected it, and how there was they did some analysis of what the attackers actually did after they compromised specific victims. So not just the sort of general attack, but they were talking about what was the goal of this thing. In the second segment, they were talking about, they had a whole bunch of topics as usual. Cybersecurity failure among the highest risks, the most pressing concerns facing CISOs today, how to reboot a broken or outdated security strategy, how to keep your cool in high-stress situations. Data privacy law is coming, and a 21st century solution to our cybersecurity skills shortfall. So all pretty interesting topics for anybody in this space. On Security and Compliance Weekly number 59, Flea, Jeff, Josh, and Scott had on Anthony Palmieri, an enterprise account executive at Ekron Systems, and they were talking about mitigating insider threats. So this is, that's something we've all been preaching about for a long, long time, is the idea of insider threats. And I always get frustrated when people don't trust me as an employee, but I also get frustrated when they do trust me. You know what I mean? And they also talked then about how to develop insider threat programs, and in particularly, the second segment was then a specific focus on how to actually build an insider threat program. So a very, very relevant topic for everybody out there. On Security Weekly News number 95 already, Jason Wood, he took a story off my list. I was going to sing a whole thing, but it didn't work out. And I'm sure he talked about it more intelligently than I would have. But the story was about being targeted, security researchers being targeted by North Korean APTs, and they were using a Visual Studio project. So he went through some of the details of that. In there was an article that covered all the DLLs and how all that was broken down. So quite an interesting thing if you're interested in that Korean APT, and I have another story about that later. On Paul's Security Weekly number 681 last night, first up was Michael Reutman, the chief data scientist at Kenna Security. The topic was XDR. How do we know the security protections we're investing in are working? And they introduced some kind of pineapple pizza drink that involves CBD, which is definitely sketchy. I think Paul invented it or something. It was Joe Rogan invented it. Okay, so Joe Rogan's sketchy pineapple pizza CBD drink, which is probably why there's so much vomit in her today. But no, I'm just kidding. Kill Cliff. Okay, sounds sketchy to me. The Flaming Joe is the name of that drink. Okay, so I'm getting all kind of I'm learning more about this drink as we go along. It's not making it sound more appealing at all. It's basically right up there with a Black Samurai in my book. But okay. Anyway, in the second segment, Dan DeClose, the founder, CEO, and president at PlexTrack, was on to talk about how to do effective assessments, the maturity of your security posture, and team makeup. Dan has if you don't know Dan, he has a lot of experience building these kind of teams. So that's definitely a segment you should probably check out. And of course, the news. My favorite threat of the week is going to have to be the dead. No, not zombies. So when I was an auditor, one of the places that we almost really started auditing back, it was like early 2000, was the user list. And one of the first things I ever looked at as an auditor was who are your users and what can they do? And a lot of people had no idea. I mean, I went to these big companies, it's 30,000 users in the user list, and I'm going, who are all these people? Who has access to what? And they had no idea. And we ended up writing a tool to dump the database of permissions just to try to even get some kind of idea of what all these things were. And so when you dump your database of users from Active Directory or even just a good old shadow file, what's in it? Who are these people? When you see a user called BDaddy, who is that? And what do they have access to? So how many are real? Are they real employees with real needs? And I mean, this doesn't even get into slicing and dicing about permission. But so what's your turnover rate? 10%? Well, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, the average turnover rate per year in the United States, now this is a non-scientific Google inquiry I did, but it was 44.3%. Now that probably includes part-time and hourly and all kinds of stuff, so I'm sure it's, it's a little higher than you're probably dealing with at your sea level, but regardless, that's a lot of turnover. And I'm guessing that a lot of those people, even if you are talking about part-time, hourly, whatever, they are indeed in that database. Did somebody retire? Did somebody quit? Did they disappear? Did they join the ranks of the living dead? I mean, think about it. I mean, how do you do that? Now, most organizations that have mature security infrastructure have a process. But even then, when we were auditing people that had mature infrastructure, they still basically weren't very good at this. They just didn't really keep up with it. It was about like landlords getting back those keys after you get kicked out of your apartment. Although I did know landlords that sent out, like a guy with a ball bat named Gusto. It was a real person, and he went and got the keys back. But he usually had some line like let me explain what a damage deposit is for, So what is your process for sending all those user accounts to the graveyard with a stake through their heart? I mean, we really tend to focus on what HR people call involuntary separation, which is a nice way of saying somebody that got fired. But I mean, when you have involuntary separation, there's all this sort of, animus to do something. And, you're going to have security escort them out of the building. Not that this ever happened to me, with all your stuff will be shipped to you and you don't even get to go back to your desk and all those kind of things. And they tend to do that with layoffs and firings and all those kind of things. But did the account get closed? I mean, ideally, yeah, you did. But my experience was like sometimes when people retired, it wasn't uncommon for them to actually ask to hang on to their accounts at the company for a few weeks because they were retiring and it was like old Dave here really put in the time after 45 years of scraping gum off the underside of the desk and plunging out the toilets. We're so pleased to announce his retirement. And then old Dave goes in and goes, I'd like to keep my email address if that'd be okay with everybody. And what do you say? When executives retired, they often wanted to keep their email open for a while, or they were even being kept on retainer. It's like, the CFO is leaving, but they want to keep that person on for a while so they can access certain things. And then all of a sudden 5 years later, somebody's auditing and they go through and they go, who is this? And they go, that person was the CISO like 12 years ago. Like, why are they still in here? Well, the article I attached was talking about seeing the dead come back to life in your systems because people do die. I mean, I hate to be graphic, but they do, and they retire. And sometimes they have to go to the psych ward. What happens in all those cases? I walked in a place one morning and a guy was literally dancing on the table and singing while he was stripping. It was a senior VP who literally had to be taken out of the building in a straitjacket. No kidding. It was an interesting morning. But I wonder if his account was still active a week later because I don't know anybody that was running around doing anything other than talking about how he went crazy. Did somebody go in the system and disable his accounts, or was he sitting down at the psych ward still logging in? Probably. So this is where you may want to try and put your house in order. It's a low-level task to archive, disable, or whatever you're going to do with these accounts, but you probably need to do something. And my approach was that we archived the entire account, the desktop, and everything, and preserved it for 7 years at Financials because they had to be able to reproduce these accounts in lawsuits, and lawsuits for these things could come from all kinds of directions. They did scale it back for lower-level people to like 2 years because it was starting to get voluminous, but the legal type said that was sufficient. I was still worried about it because suit could still be filed 5, 6, 7 years out. But the point is, get with your legal people and then build out a plan and put it in place because these accounts are out there. Credential stuffing is essentially the live chicken in the pentagram that brings them out of the grave. And I will tell you, we started polling these accounts a lot and saw that more than a few of them were active even after the person had been gone for years. And the last tale, I did see a case where an employee voluntarily separated, so that's a nice way to say they quit, and they went to a competitor, and within days, guess what? That employee was on the system, logging into the old account and downloading things. And when we contacted them, he said, I was just downloading some pictures and stuff I put on my company machine. I was like, well, that it seems like you were downloading a whole bunch of spreadsheets and stuff. So you might want to invest in some steaks and garlic. No, I mean like eat. What, steaks? No, I wrote that I was hungry. I haven't had lunch. I had a Bloody Mary, but that's all. All right. The big story this week was most likely this business with Emotet. So Emotet, if you've never, I'm sure you've heard of it, has been around for years. It's usually billed as one of the largest and most used botnets in the world. It's delivered by typically a Word document, and then you become part of the botnet. I guess at some point Emotet reached a critical mass of crime or something. Like teach a man to rob a Wawa, that's a mini mart if you aren't from the Mid-Atlantic. And he eats for a day, teach him to rob 25 million people at a time, and he's a spiritual leader or something like that. But I guess they hit that, like critical crime profile mass where when you call in and you say, my wallet got stolen, I was walking through the parking lot last night down by, down on the Lower East Side, and the NYPD goes, yeah, okay, so what? To, like, okay, we're sending the SWAT team. So in probably what was the largest law enforcement action I've ever seen for cyber, the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, France, Lithuania, they were in there, Canada, the Ukraine, and the United States all coordinated with Europol and Eurojust in this thing called the European Multidisciplinary Platform Against Criminal Threats. I think when you say it in Dutch, it's funnier, but it's called Impact with an E. And they seized the infrastructure of Emotet. So basically, they investigated Emotet. They figured out where the servers and the domains, and they seized all the domains and equipment. And what this did was it allowed them to point the infected machines all over the world to a law enforcement controlled infrastructure. So, wow. I mean, that was a takedown of, epic, Al Capone kind of proportions. So, is that the end of Emotet? Probably not. I mean, Emotet, it's so widely used. I'm sure they'll get new servers and new domains, and they'll put it right back up and start sending out Word files again. The article has a great deal of detail about all this, about how Emotet works. About if you need to explain this to anybody, there's a really nice graphics and things in that article I linked. Microsoft had been testing a product called Application Guard for Office 365 for a while, and had originally planned to make it widely available in December, but they didn't. But it did finally get released to enterprise customers. The product helps with a very common problem: dangerous Office documents. I hate it when people send me Office documents, and no matter how many times I tell them not to send them or to send them in some other form, they still do it. Emotet, Word documents, yeah, okay. So this new approach, which is a sort of evolution beyond protected mode or protected view, which is what they've been using, basically is doing what a lot of us have done for a long time, which is manually create, like I have a VMware environment, and I email anything like that I get to my VMware machine, and I open it in there. And so if it's Emotet, if it's something else, I don't care. I just blow the thing away and make a new instance of it. But basically, and this includes Excel and PowerPoint, but this new approach allows you to open them in a virtual sandbox where they can't really do anything, or at least you can see what they're doing, and it's not going to get out of the sandbox. So far, unfortunately, this is only available for enterprise. So if you're using enterprise versions of Office 365, you may want to download and add this feature. I haven't got the chance to try it yet, but I'm going to try to look for it this afternoon. The British Department of Education issued a shipment of laptops to school children to assist them with continuing to attend school during the lockdown. Based on this story, the laptops came preloaded with a self-propagating worm that reaches out to Russian C2 servers when it goes active. According to the Department of Education in England, they did detect it and removed it at the schools when they first got the devices out of the box. But the laptops themselves were called GeoBook 1Es. I've never heard of this, but they were running Windows 10, and they were manufactured in Shenzhen, China, by something called Tactus Group, who apparently declined to comment on the story. I don't know about you, but that's why I put my own images on laptops I buy, even when I get them from very reputable sources. The malware was something called W32 Gamaroo-BJ, which is a really old worm. I did look that up, and it looks like it was from like back around 2010, 2011. And according to the article anyway, they said that it didn't seem to be doing anything, and that the command and control servers that were out there in Russia did not appear to be active. So it may have just been, some wacky oversight. And I was like, really? Like, how did this get on these devices? So, but beats me. In another blow to security through obscurity community, and I don't like you. I think security through obscurity is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. But a new NAT slipstreaming attack was revealed. Now, back in November, the first attack of this sort was documented. And basically what happened, and again, of course, it starts with click the link. When you click the link, the website that you end up on basically tricks the NAT, and by this they're talking about PAT, I think, because SNAT it wouldn't matter, but it creates a session with this web server, and there's a link, and it can use TCP or UDP, and then it allows inbound connections to the machine that has clicked the link. So basically this involves some common NAT features, and we're talking about PAT. But the original attack focused primarily on compromising the browser, and it exploited an application-level gateway feature of NAT, which is found in most NAT-type systems. So the initial click runs a JavaScript in the browser, and then that sends traffic out to a command and control server, and the command and control server is then able to craft packets which look like they're part of the original application PAT translation entry. and can then allow connections back into that padded system, which is kind of an interesting thing. So this was really a very interesting thing back in November. This could, of course, allow then the execution of things like WannaCry or other SMB-based attack or whatever, that you can send in. In the new attack, the NAT can be fooled such that they can create connects to any system in the workspace that is running the application level gateway. So this is called H.323 application level gateway. And I guess that runs that's one that's often used on IoT devices. But it allows you to reach, so this initial attack can reach out to other H.323 application level gateways in the network. The article has a video with a proof of concept, and basically the fix, of course, is to patch these up as the CVEs have been fixed for most browsers. So if you don't patch your browsers, this is a good one to look into. In an update to the Google tag report that Jason covered on Tuesday on Security Weekly News, which was talking about this Visual Studio-based attack from possibly North Korea, Microsoft has now attributed the campaign to Lazarus Group. So the 365 Defender Threat Intelligence Team issued a blog post, which I did link in, about the campaign and said it was Zinc. And Zinc is a component, or it's a threat group that's associated with North Korea-based Lazarus Group. So Microsoft's basically saying, yeah, this was North Korea. Yes, it was Lazarus. It was the group called Zinc specifically. The blog post I linked had a full analysis of the attack, and they had an analysis of an attack actually in progress, which was how they ended up attributing this to Zinc/Lazarus in North Korea. Qualys revealed that a Sudo vulnerability may allow local users to obtain root access to Linux systems. CVE 2021-3156 was reported by Baron Samedit at Qualys, and Sudo did release a patch with version 1.5.5 P2. So the bug is not remotely exploitable, so you can't actually do anything unless you're logged into the system already, in which case you can do whatever you want, right? But this did allow people to get root on systems using this bug. So if you're interested in that particular story. And finally, I could not resist the GameStop story. This was the headline on everything all week. It was a big deal. And the only reason I'm going to put it here is because it was the most hackery kind of thing I've ever seen that wasn't actual hacking. It was just the hacker mentality, hacker lifestyle, hacker ideology of let's stick it to the big guys. Basically, in the world, if you're unfamiliar with this kind of stuff, large hedge funds, and hedge funds are these very large monetary collections of rich people who go out and manipulate things. Washington insiders and other Wall Street types do stuff like this all the time, and they get away with it. Kyle calls Chip and says, "Hey, man, sell, and this has been something that's gone on since the stock market was created, and we all deny that it goes on. And these hedge funds are no exception. They have large amounts of money. They can manipulate the markets by either threatening people to pull all their shares. They could do all that stuff's illegal, so I'm sure they've never, ever done it. It's never, ever happened. No one would ever do such a thing because they're all honest and straightforward. No way billionaires ever working against the interest of everybody else. But so here's what happened. So what they did, it was called a short sell. And so whenever these big shot hedge funds think somebody's about to go down the drain, like say GameStop, they get together and they say, look, we're going to buy puts on this. And a put, if you don't know, is an agreement to sell. So a put means I have the right to sell you shares of stock at a later date. And so you put a put and you say, I'm going to sell you so many shares at this later date. And so puts are sold by someone who thinks the price will rise. So this is somebody who says, oh, yeah, you're going to do that? I'll sell you the shares, I'll sell you these puts. And you can force me to buy these shares from you later at this price. And so I obviously think the price of the share is going to go up. The person that is buying the puts thinks the price of the stock is going to go down. So they obviously thought that GameStop was going to go through the floor. And so basically you have to cover that position at some point. And this is called option trading if you aren't familiar. So this Reddit board, which is called Wall Street Bets and has about 4 million members, decided that they were going to basically buy this stock after the hedge funds bought their puts. So they drove the price through the roof, like 1,700% increase in the price of this stock. And the hedge funds, okay, here it comes, they're still obligated to cover the position regardless of the price. So this is why option trading is so scary to me. So if I agree to sell you 100 shares of stock on March 1st and you sell me the puts for $100 a share, so this would be like, basically I'm assuming I will be able to buy these shares for a lot less than $100 on March 1st. So they drop to $50 a share. I make $50 profit on each share, right? But now if on March 1st the stock price is $1,000 a share, I just lost a lot of money. And these option trades actually have an infinite potential loss because the price could go to $2,000 a share, $3,000 a share. I'm still obligated to cover it, and then I end up having to declare bankruptcy. Now, the reason I did call this hacker stuff is because the theory is the market is always fair, that players play fair, that nobody breaks the law. Kyle never calls Chip and says, hey, man, my agency down at State is getting ready to issue this report, or we're going to issue a loss report tomorrow. And everybody makes logical trades. But in practice, there's a lot of skullduggery involved in the stock market, and there was no good reason to be buying GameStop, which is where all this outrage from the rich people comes. That was basically practically defunct. So, you get the idea. Anyway, it's an interesting story. I attached a full analysis from NPR if you want to read it. And that's a news wrap-up for the week of 24 January 2021 in the time of plague. Hang in there, and maybe someday we will all be vaccinated.